chess friends, welcome to the Fide World Championship 2024, I am Stockfish, and I am going to analyze the round 8 game between Gukesh D and Liren. Ding is playing with the white pieces against Gukesh, and Gukesh is the best chess player from India, while Ding is from China. This game, which I am going to illustrate, is just brilliant and masterful, so stay tuned until the end of the video, and let's get started without wasting any time.
Let the game begin.
Ding starts the game with c4, employing the English opening. Here Ding could play d4 or e4, but he chose to consider c4, and we have e5, which is called the King's English variation, where c6 and d5 can be possible, or Gukesh can play d6. We have knight to c3 and bishop to b4. Ding is playing hyper-aggressively because he doesn't let Gukesh control the center. Therefore, Ding played a surprise move that shocks Gukesh a little bit with knight to d5, attacking the bishop. Now many players might think of considering bishop to c5, getting access to this diagonal. Now you can concretize your structure by playing e3, blocking the bishop's diagonal, and the bishop cannot land on the airport where d4 can be arrived at. Therefore, after c6, white can play d4, attacking the bishop, and after knight capture and capture happen, black can play a significant move with queen to a5 check and pick up the pawn on the c5 square. Now the queen is maintaining center pressure, where knight to c6 can be possible. From white's perspective, he will consider queen g4, attacking the pawn with knight to f3 and all other stuff. As my arrows are showing here, bring out your bishop, play castle, play normally, and the game will be very healthy. But in our actual game, Gukesh is not interested in playing very passively. He is like an Indian prodigy. He is an Indian prodigy who loves to play interestingly and tactically with bishop to e7. At this point, I was thinking a little bit when I first looked at this move, why did Gukesh play this move? Why are they just wasting their developing pieces by exchanging all the pieces in the opening? That's bad manners. But Gukesh is a teenager, he loves to go on an adventure, not like Ding Liren, who just sits, asks for tea, and waits for 1 hour. We have d6 to protect the pawn along with the opening of the bishop's diagonal, where knight to c6 and knight to f6 can be possible for the genre of playing a short side castle. Even Gukesh can play f5 and e4 to expand the structure. We have g3 and c6 on the board to attack the knight. Many players here might think of considering knight back to c3. But that's a completely vulnerable move. You know why? Because Gukesh has very good centered pawns. He can expand his structure by playing f5 and showing his attitude to Ding Liren, that you are just nothing to me, you are almost in your 30s and I am in my 20s, and I am still capable of defeating you. The advantage for Gukesh is that the g5 square will be well secured by the dark square bishop and the queen. After a few moves later, Gukesh would continue playing castling, and he would have to get this advanced pawn structure, which is very good. Even he can play a5, and you can see that Gukesh is playing very well. He has his knight very active, the bishop is doing a very good job, the queen can maneuver itself to go to the g6 square, the rook has a semi-open file, and the queen can also go to b6, this would be a very good option for Gukesh. But in our actual game, Ding is not interested in playing passive moves. He said that no matter how old he is, if a prodigy comes in front of him, he can defeat anybody. He is not afraid of any Indian prodigy. Let me capture the bishop on the e7 square, and after capturing, we have bishop to g3. Now Gukesh cannot play f5 anymore. The reason is that if Gukesh plays f5, he has no dark square bishop to control the g5 square. Therefore, Ding can play d3 to get access to the g5 square for the knight. And he can create some vulnerabilities. He can even play b4 to dominate the queen side, where Gukesh cannot push forward his queen side pawns. Therefore, after queen to e8 for a long journey for the knight and the queen, where d5 can be possible for center breaking, Ding can immediately strike Gukesh and play c5 on the board. Gukesh might spill his water while drinking it and spill it on Ding Liren's chair because he will notice that his d6 and e5 pawns will be under attack by the pieces where bishop to b2 can possibly arrive. Therefore, Gukesh has to capture the pawn on c5, weakening the center pawn, and after the capture, Black might think of considering knight to d5 because it secures some sort of squares. after bishop to b2 happens in the game, I mean attacking the pawn on the e5 square, black would like to consider knight to d7 to protect the pawn, therefore, Ding can immediately strike him by considering e4 on the board, attacking the knight, and Gukesh has to play very carefully. After the exchange occurs and knight to f6 might happen in the game, Ding would play castle, sacrificing the pawn on the e4 square. This is the alternative variation that I am showing you. You must keep it in your brain and remember. Then rook to e1 will arrive, attacking the knight and the pawn simultaneously on the board, and you can see how Ding Liren's position will be just as aggressive as a tiger, just like a tiger dominates the jungle by roaring and every animal gets scared. Even if Gukesh is up some pawns, Ding can capture the pawn on the e5 square because if you capture the bishop on e5, Ding can capture back on e5, attacking the knight and the queen simultaneously on the board. Therefore, after the queen moves, Ding can further his attack, and here Ding will play a very masterful move. Can you guess what Ding would consider here? The move that Ding can consider is knight to h4, then after the queen moves away, here, Ding will consider another powerful move with his shoulder. The move that Ding can consider is bishop to d6, attacking the knight and the rook simultaneously on the board. After the rook moves, bishop takes c5 will arrive, and after the capture, the position will be just devastated for Gukesh, you know what. Now, Ding can show his real power, the Chinese product, with rook to e8 check, attacking the king. After the rook moves, capture and recapture, queen to d8 check will arrive, with the idea of playing knight to f5, attacking the queen. You can see that the bishop is pinned, and the rook on a8 will be under attack. Therefore, even if you dare to construct queen to e6, thinking that it will protect your position, you are playing against Ding Liren. How could he spare you? He will consider knight to d6 check, and after the king moves, rook to c1 will arrive, attacking the knight. After the knight moves, bishop to e4 check will arrive, and you can see that the king will be just paralyzed there. After the king moves, Gukesh will test a losing suite with queen to h4 check, and the game will be just over. But Gukesh, my boy, you have to light up India with your victory so that many Indians will get motivation from your games. Therefore, Gukesh thinks for India, thinks for his motherland, and plays the powerful move f6. He is trying to protect the center because it is the best move. You might think, you might ask, that the light squares just got weakened, but the problem for Ding is that his bishop cannot get access to these light squares. Furthermore, the knight cannot invade due to this pawn structure. The dark square bishop will face problems because the central pawns are all located on dark squares. Therefore, it is a good pawn structure that Gukesh has made. We have castling, and bishop to e6, b3 follows in the game, where b2 can arrive to get access to the diagonal and also protect the pawn. Therefore, Gukesh smiles a little bit, looks into the eyes of Ding, and plays d5 brilliantly. The center is well protected by the pawn and the pieces, and it also pressures the c4 pawn. Therefore, Ding plays a3, sacrificing the pawn on the c4 square. Many players might think of capturing the pawn on c4, thinking that after capture and recapture, black will win one pawn. But that is a trap because Gukesh played f6 a long time ago. He created some weaknesses on the light squares. Therefore, he doesn't need to open up the position, but he did blunder. White would consider d4, attacking the pawn. After castling, queen to c2 will follow in the game to attack the bishop and the pawn. Knight to g5 can possibly arrive to attack the pawn. Therefore, after the bishop moves and some exchanges, the g5 square will be unguarded. I will first consider rook to d1, attacking the queen. Your knight is also under attack. Therefore, you have to play queen to c7, and then knight to g5 will arrive. This knight has come to nightmare the king's position. Playing g6 is not possible. Therefore, the best move for black would be to consider bishop to g6, queen to b3 happens in the game. The king cannot go to h8 at all because knight to e6 will fork the pieces. Therefore, you have to play very carefully and play bishop to f7 to protect the square. But that does not matter because white will happily consider the bishop. Later, you notice that the rook is unpinned. Therefore, white will consider bishop to d6, attacking the queen and the knight simultaneously. How can you protect your position? Even if the queen goes to the b6 square, it does not matter because the rook is pinned to the queen, therefore, I will just capture the knight on the e7 square. Your rook is pinned, what will you do? You have nothing much to do, even if black dares to consider queen takes queen, thinking that he would capture the bishop on the next move. That would be a blunder. That's why you are just a nonsensical, intermediate, foolish, and donkey chess player. They are world champions. They will consider rook to e8 check, and you can see that the king will be just destroyed, as it will lead to checkmate. Therefore, don't be too greedy. Stay within your limits and do what you can control, don't think about what you cannot control. So, let me share an inspirational quote in sudden with you. 90% of what you're stressing about right now won't even matter a year from now. Take a deep breath. Going back to the position, we discovered that capturing the pawn on the c4 square would be a very bad choice for Gukesh. Gukesh is my best Indian friend, and after a few moves, you can see that Gukesh has played knight back to e1 because he is interested in putting the knight there. If possible in the future, f4 can be played to open up the rook's file. That's Gukesh's plan. We have f4 and rook takes f4 because the knight is under attack by the bishop. The knight can possibly arrive at the g6 square. The rook can be attacked by many pieces, and Gukesh has to play very carefully because his rook has come down to the 4th rank in the middle of the board. Knight to g6 follows in the game. Many players here might think of considering rook to f1 because they are just intermediate or advanced chess players. That's the difference between an advanced player and a world champion. Advanced players are likely to play very passively. But a world champion is a world champion. They calculate more than 10 to 20 moves ahead in each variation because they have enough time to do that. You are just playing blitz and bullet games, where you don't even calculate more than 2 moves, and you lose the game that was your winning game. That's a very bad thing for you. Anyway, you can see how Liren's rook is trying to attack the bishop. A few moves later, we have knight to d4, putting pressure on the bishop. The bishop moves back, and we have d3 on the board because Ding is likely to protect the rook by the bishop, where f5 can be possible, but f5 is not possible at all because there is a knight. Ding is trying to do his best. And Gukesh is determined to kick out the rook as soon as possible so that the rook cannot do much and cannot create so many problems on the board. The knight moves back to the f3 square to attack the knight. The knight moves back, and we have some exchanges. At this point, for Liren, the best move for white to consider is queen to d2 or bishop to b2. It would be a very good choice, but here, Ding played a very inaccurate move, which was rook to b1. This gives up some of white's advantages because it disconnects the rook from the c-file. Now Gukesh gets the opportunity to consider b5, attacking on the queen side. After capture, he would not likely capture the pawn immediately. He first played queen to b6 check, involving the queen in the invasion. In the war, the king cannot go to h1, it's time to start the endgame. Therefore, the king needs to go to the center as soon as possible. Here we have pawn capturing and bishop moving back to b1, at this point. You can see that the pawn on a2 is under attack by the bishop, so the best move for white would be to consider rook to a1, rook to b2 or queen to c2. Now, playing queen to c2 is a good move to consider, but the problem for white is that b4 will arrive, attacking the bishop. After some subsequent moves, the knight will occupy the b5 square, from where it can invade a3, right. The rook has to move, but where should the rook go? If the rook goes to the c1 square, black will happily play queen to e6, attacking both the c4 pawn and the e2 pawn simultaneously. The king will face significant pressure and feel as though he's battling malaria, needing to retreat and defend heavily. If the rook moves to the a1 square, the knight will leap to a3, attacking the queen. A few moves later, you'll see the knights dominating the board. After the bishop moves, queen to b7, bishop to f5, and knight to a4 will arrive, paralyzing white's queen. Even if the queen attempts to escape to the d4 square, it does not matter because knight to c2 will fork the rook and the queen simultaneously. The position will simply collapse into defeat for white. Alright. So, going back to the position, we discovered that any normal move to protect the pawn on a2 would be a very bad choice. That's why white sacrifices the pawn on a2, and the rook captures it happily. We then have bishop to d4 on the board, attacking both the queen and the pawn simultaneously. The queen must remain on this diagonal. If the queen goes to b8, white will play rook to a1, capturing the a5 pawn in the next move. If the queen goes to b7, the bishop's activity will become overwhelming. After knight to h4, followed by bishop to d5, the position seems safe, but chess is a beautiful game. You never know where tactical moves, motifs, or strategies might emerge. White could play queen to b3, attacking both the bishop and the queen simultaneously, and later pick up the pawn, a free chocolate, so to speak. Going back to the position, we see that any normal kind of move would be a bad choice. Therefore, Gukesh played knight to c5, blocking the attack. White responds with rook to c1, and a few moves later, the king's pieces start combining to attack the knight. Eventually, knight to d4 is played, preparing to jump to c6, and that's what happens. Knight to c6 arrives, a bold move by the knight, which is now under attack by 3 pieces. Gukesh must carefully capture the piece. A few moves later, at the end of the exchanges, the king is left with 1 rook for the knight, but Gukesh has 2 connected passed pawns, a promising position. Both players engage in repetitive maneuvers for a while, with some pawns being captured. After b3, a few moves later, we see some queen exchanges. At the end of the day, the bishop on a2 remains active. The rook cannot challenge it effectively because of a looming pawn promotion. Knight to c4 check follows, leading to the loss of the rook. Ultimately, the game ends in an opposite-colored bishop endgame, a classic drawable position where neither side can make progress. The game concludes as a draw, with both players agreeing to the result. I hope you enjoyed this thrilling World Chess Championship match. If you'd like to see more such games, feel free to comment. Wishing you all the best, take care and see you soon. Don't forget to subscribe for more.